Hello and welcome to another BlenderWiz video tutorial. This is the 13th part of the 1957 Ford Thunderbird tutorial series. Previously, we modeled some minor components of the interior. In this episode, we are going to create all of the materials for the car and create a basic test scene and lighting setup. We are going to go ahead now and create the material for the headlights. A very important part of creating believable headlights is getting the grooves in the lenses. These grooves act to reflect beams of light, allowing them to hit more area, which makes it easier for people to see at night. While you could sit there and attempt to model each groove into the face of the headlight, it will take a long time, and in the end you will have a huge vertex count. Instead, we are going to use an image texture plugged into the displacement node to sort of fake this appearance. So let's go over into the materials. Let's get rid of the grease pencil. Disable that. There we go. We don't actually need to see the rendered view right now, so I'm just going to close that. And with the headlight selected, hit New. Let's also come over here to the Materials tab and open up the previewer. So we can see here that it's displaying the material that we have here. So we have a diffuse plugged in, and it's showing a very diffuse material. So if we cut that, it will go to a holdout because there's nothing plugged in. And let's go ahead and plug in a glass node. So that's Glossy. So that's really all there is to it. We need to add the image material though, or the image displacement. So come over, get an image texture. We're going to use this headlight or headlamp bump. And if we plug that directly into this displacement now, notice how dark it is on here. And no light can pass through there. So to fix this, let's go ahead and bring in an invert. Set the factor amount down to 0.6. And notice how much easier it is to see through there. You can turn it down even more, like 0.5, there is none. So you can do it 0.55 and it'll be a little bit clearer. So that's good. Next, if we were to render this right now, you wouldn't actually see anything on here. And this is because this is using the UV vector. This sphere in this previewer has already been UV unwrapped, and that's why it's displaying nicely. So we need to come over to the UV editor. Let's go into front view mode, orthographic. Let's get rid of that grease pencil again. Tab into edit mode, and with the headlamp selected, hit U, project from view, and then just scale it up so that it's inscribed within this ring circle on our image. So let's tab out of edit mode, head back over to the materials. Next we will be creating the chrome material that will act as the reflector. So just go ahead and select this back portion here, hit Ctrl+ on the numpad until the entire chrome area is selected. So right like so. Let's create a new material, call it headlamp reflector, and this is just going to be a smooth glossy material. So bring in a glossy, connect them right like so, turn down that roughness, and actually let's turn on sharp just so that it runs a little faster, and click assign. Let's also name the headlamp glass material. So headlamp glass. There we go. And that's just good practice. Let's also give it a color so that we can actually see the difference. And I'm just going to turn this one down fairly dark. So now we can see what has material and what does not. So there is that. If we were to render this right now, it would be pretty much black because there is no light inside of here. So let's actually go ahead now and create an emitter. So select this second ring here and hit Control S or Shift S, cursor to selected. Let's tab out of edit mode now and bring in an icosphere. Hit T to bring up the tools and make sure that subdivisions is set to 1. When it is, tab into edit mode with the icosphere selected and scale it down so that it fits inside of the headlamp. Once you've done that, let's tab out of edit mode, create a new material, call it lamp, and then headlight. And this is really just going to be an emission node. So go ahead and grab an emission node there. And since we actually have a material in the way, 1 is not nearly strong enough. If you want the light to look like it's on, you'll want to set that up to about 50, and that'll then bounce out and make it look like the headlight is actually on. In this next portion, we are going to create the chrome material for the rest of the chrome parts on the car. A basic glossy node plugged into the material output will work. However, looking at chrome, it seems to fall off as you move toward the edges. So the color of the gloss becomes darker as you go out. So we are going to actually use 2 glossy nodes plugged into a mix node, and then use the Fresnel node to affect the factor amount. So let's go ahead and create that now. Create a new material, not there, or yes, with the material, or with the bumper selected. Let's call it Chrome. Let's get rid of this diffuse node and bring in a glossy node. Let's duplicate that, move it down along the Y, create or bring in a Fresnel node and a mix node. So let's connect all of these up. So glossy into the top and the bottom, and then the Fresnel into the factor amount. So it should look something kind of like that. We're going to leave the IOR the same, because that is just fine. And then let's turn down the roughness on this first glossy to about 0.01. And then on this outer glossy, it can be 0.1. So it gets a little bit rougher as you move toward the sides. And then we can just take this and turn it a little bit darker. Something kind of like that. So that is a nice chrome material. I'm going to take the color, viewport color, and turn it down right about there. We're not going to render it because that'll take a while. Let's go ahead first though and select all of these objects, and then I think Control L and create material links. So I've got a chrome piece there, and not that one. Nope. There we go. And just set all of these to chrome. So I'll do the rest of them later. The door handles, these little emblems on the side, there's some chrome pieces inside, which we will actually deal with later. But for the most part, this is what we need. Now, one thing I will mention from a few tests that I've done, leaving this grill flat without the subsurf modifier, the light will only hit this on the front, and we can't actually tell that there's any depth. And this leads to it being really boring. So just hit Control 1 and give it a subsurf of 1, and let's set it to smooth shading. While it doesn't look so great in the viewport, it looks quite good in the final results. So let's go ahead now and actually assign the rest of the objects to the chrome material. So back here, this handle, these indoor handles. That one there. Let's just make the whole steering wheel chrome for now. That rearview mirror, this one, and the windshield wipers. Those guys, those guys. Pretty much anything that's chrome. And just select that. Control L, materials, and there we go. Oops, we need to add some chrome there. Quite a few chrome pieces on this car. And actually, it seems that our emblem is in a little bit too much, so let's just bring it out by hitting G and then double tapping Y. So there we go. So those should be all of the chrome pieces on this car. I can't think of any more right now. I'm going to turn up the viewport color just a tad, because that's really dark. So that should almost be it for the chrome. I forgot we have these guys as well. Anything else? I'm going to leave most of the interior stuff for later. But I think this is good to go. Let's bring this out along the Y. Or it's going backward. There we go. And that's got chrome as well. So everything that's chrome or has any chrome on it has been chromed. Next up, we are going to create the leather material. The leather is a fairly complicated setup, but it isn't too bad in the end. We're going to set it up in a group and then use the group for the different colors of leather. So leather has a wonderful texture to it, and we're going to get this effect by using a Voronoi texture. It also has a slight gloss to it, which we'll get through the gloss node and a diffuse node plugged into a mix node. So let's get working on that. Create a new material with something that is leathery, such as the dashboard. Let's call it red leather. I think that's how you spell it. You can do really any color you want. If you want to do a black interior, that's fine. I'm going to do kind of a maroon red color. Although I might actually go with a candy apple red instead, just to see how that looks. So let's get rid of our diffuse node here and bring out a group. Let's tab into the node edit mode and let's name it leather. Shift A, let's just begin with a diffuse node and the glossy node. So there's our diffuse and there's the glossy. So the glossy is just the, basically it's like specularity, but in cycles instead. So, a little bit fun. Let's plug in the mix node there and there, and we're going to want a Fresnel node. Oops, not that one. There we go. Okay, so let's plug these guys into the edge there. So this is the gloss color. That's the IOR. Everything's good. And then we can just pull this one out there. By turning up the amount of the roughness, it will be less of a smooth reflection and more like specularity in the old Blender render engine. So this next part is actually where we start getting the leather material feel, so the texture itself. So we're going to want to bring out a Voronoi texture. Let's put it down there. We're going to want the invert. Plug it in like so. And I'm going to set this to, actually, I don't think we need the invert. Let's just get a power node, or a math node. Plug the top into the output there. Set this to power. And plop this out. So this is the shader, this is the displacement. And then let's just plug this to the side there. Put this, call this size. And then we just need a texture coordinate. So, like so. And that should just be plugged into the object. So there is the basic setup for leather there. This would be a white leather, very boring, nothing to it. And we wanted kind of a maroon color. So, the color I'm going to go with is actually in hex, which Blender allows. And it's that color, A90E00. Alright, like so. I'm going to turn the IOR down to about 1.2 and leave the size alone at 5. So now you can kind of see it in the render viewport. Can't really see too much though. I'm actually going to turn this down. Right about there. No, that's kind of pink. I don't know, something kind of like that, I guess. Or I could just plug that in like that. Okay, so that's good. Let's go ahead and assign the rest of these objects that need it into that. So Control L, materials. There we go. And the seats, of course. And finally, our sun visors. So for the seats, I'm actually going to create a dual pattern here, kind of a white and, or it'll be an off-white. So with the seat selected, let's create a new material, call it white leather. Let's delete this diffuse node, come down to groups, and pull out the leather node, plug the surface in there, and the displacement there. Oh, that is why we need the invert node. Seems to like putting that way up there. There we go. 3.5. Yeah, we do need the invert in there. Let's make sure that it's in the red node as well. Yep, okay. Wonderful. So let's kind of push this slightly yellow. And now we just need to select the parts of the cushion that we want. So right in there. Like so. The underside of the cushion doesn't really matter because we're not going to be seeing it very much. But yeah, I'm just going to put it into the local view. Just because that's easier to see it. Okay, and now let's go ahead and assign that. If we go back into normal view and do the same for the back cushion, let's bring out that white leather there. Just select the faces there. Those guys there. Oops. And let's assign that to white leather as well. So going back into normal view, we now have a leather material. Next, we are going to create the tire rubber material. Since we are going to have white wall tires, we will need to create two materials, one for the wall and one for the tread. Both of these are very simple materials. So let's create a new material with the tire selected. Let's call it tire tread. And actually we can leave the diffuse node in here and really just turn this down. For me, I used 2C, 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 and that works perfectly fine. And I'm just going to change the color there. Next, for the wall, if you don't have a loop cut there already, place one there and it will go perfectly where we need it. Create a new material slot and a new material. Let's call it tire wall. And really, this is perfect for what we need. So just assign that in there, and you'll see that the wall now has a nice white stripe. We can do the same for this tire, or we can just duplicate this front tire, and assuming that your cursor is positioned over the back one here, so selecting that rim, cursor to selected, take the duplicated tire, hit Shift S, selection to cursor, and that will perfectly position our tire where we want it. So there are our white walled tires. This next material we are creating is by far the most complicated in this tutorial series. We are going to be creating the car paint material itself. While we could simply use a diffuse node and a glossy node plugged into the a mix shader and then plugged into the output, this would not give us a nice result. Instead, we are going to create our own metallic shader. So there are 4 inputs we need to take into consideration with this paint node. The first is the deep color. That is the color we see when looking straight at the paint. Then there is the shallow color. That is the color we see when we look across the paint. Next, there is the metallic color. That is the color of the flecks of metal in the paint. And finally, we need to look at the fleck size, or the size of the metallic flecks in the paint. So let's get going on that. With the body selected, let's create a new material. Let's rename it car paint. And let's get rid of our diffuse node. That's not going to help us here. Create a new group. I'm just gonna call it car paint. Let's tab it into edit mode there and get going on that. So grab a mix shader. Actually, there are different places we could start. Let's begin with the base coat, and that will be a diffused node. So let's grab that, and that will just go directly out. This will be connected to the deep color. So deep color. And then we need another diffuse node. So duplicate that and connect this one to the shallow color. We need a mix shader. Connect those two together. And now we need another mix shader. Let's plug that one there. Okay. And let's add in a glossy shader. This is going to affect the metallic flecks. So plug that back there. Metallic color. And set this to CGX. Set the roughness to 0.3. And just plug this output of this shader into the mix shader that we created. Now we need to set up the node setup for creating the metallic flecks themselves. So this is going to basically be a Voronoi texture again. And I think we want to set this to cells. And that will just create these little boxes, basically. And now let's go get gamma. Plug that in there. This is just to make sure that everything is all working right. 3.5, you can adjust that number. That's the one that works best for me. Just plug that into that mix shader there. Now we're going to want the mapping. So that would be under the vector. So grab a mapping node, connect vector to vector, set the scale to 80 on all three axes, and now we need the texture coordinate. So go to input, texture coordinate, and that should connect into the object. So now we can take this scale, drop it down there, and do fleck size. Okay, so that's coming along pretty nicely. I'm pretty sure we got it. Now we just need to add the clear coat. So duplicate this mix node. Let's bring in another glossy shader. Plug that directly into that shader there. Set the distribution to sharp, turn the roughness all the way down, and let's grab a Fresnel. Where is that? Right there. Okay. Set the IOR to 1.5, and that should be the output there. So when you're done, you should have something that looks kind of like that. In the preview, you can kind of see the little flecks in there, and a nice, it looks pretty good. Although it's fairly even because, well, we haven't set it up to be different. All the colors on the input are identical. So I want to create kind of an off-white pearlized color. So basically, the deep color is actually slightly purplish tint. Very slight, not a whole lot. And then there's actually quite a lot of yellow. And then for the metallics, or metallic flecks, it's just a light blue. And that should actually give us pretty much what we want. See here, you can see a nice purple color as you look deeper, and then it gets yellow as you go out. So that is the car paint shader. We're just going to go ahead now and quickly give the windscreen a nice glass material. So create a new material. Let's call it windscreen glass, and cut this diffuse out and bring in a glass node. And really this is all we need to do. I'm just gonna change this one's color a little bit so that we can see what it looks like, or see which material has it, and apply that to these side windows as well. And that should really just about do it for the glass materials. We are going to go ahead now and create the material for the taillights. Once again, just like the headlights, the taillights have some grooves in them to help diffuse the light more. And we could model these, but it is not necessary. Instead, we are going to use a wave texture set to ring to fake the ridges. So let's get going on that now. So with the taillight selected, insert a new material slot, click new. Let's call this break light and then underscore cover. So this is going to be a red light, so let's set it to red in the viewport. Doesn't have to be perfectly red, but red enough to get the point across. Let's tab into edit mode so that we can actually assign it. So it should be those guys there, Let's go ahead and assign that now. Okay, and while we're at it, let's create a new material slot. Call it reverse light underscore cover. And let's select our reverse light, assign that there. Set the viewport color. I'm going to change it to a slightly yellow tint. So there we go. So now that we have those assigned, we can go ahead and start working on the actual material. So let's delete that diffuse node. We're going to fake the rings, and while we could use the rings straight into this displacement part here, displacement is a fairly heavy function for rendering, so we're actually just going to fake it by using two different colors of refraction shaders. So create two refraction shaders. This top one is going to be the light color, so it's going to be the main area that has the light coming through. And then this bottom one is going to be dark, so that will be like the grooves. So on the top one, let's just give it red, almost perfectly red, maybe a little bit of green. And then for the bottom one, let's use the eyedropper tool, select that red, and turn down the dark or the brightness shader or brightness slider. Let's bring in a mix node, connect those two up like so, and there we go. So the factor is going to be affected by a ring texture, so let's go ahead and grab that now, or the wave texture. Connect the factor of the wave texture into the factor of the mix shader. Change it from bands to rings. We're going to go ahead and turn everything except for the scale down to 0. So the distortion, the detail, and the detail scale should all be 0. Now we're going to go ahead and bring in a texture coordinate, connect UV to the vector, change the scale to 20. So the scale is just how many rings we're going to see in our tail light. So now we need to UV unwrap this tail light. So let's head over to the UV editor now. With the tail light selected, let's go into edit mode, edit mode, and then project from view. Should position it right about there when you do that. And let's just scale it up so that it's about the same as this circle on this texture if you happen to still have it open. And now we just need to move it over to the center. Should be good, but not perfect yet. We want to get it centered to the cursor because that is the origin. So cursor to selected, that should be good to go. So let's head back over to the materials now that we have it all set up, or UV unwrapped. So that is good to go now. You can't really tell what's going on here because, well, it's pretty dark. And also this sphere that's in here is UV unwrapped a little bit differently than we have our tail light. So it'll still be dark if we were to render it in the viewport though. And that is because there's no light behind it. It's quite dark inside of the car because there are no lights in there. So what we need to do is essentially the same as the headlight. We need a reflector and a lamp inside. So let's go ahead and hide our tail light. With the body selected, let's take this ring here, duplicate it, hit P to separate by selection. With that new ring selected, let's hit E and then Y to extrude it along the Y-axis. Hit F to fill that back face. And now, let's get rid of the car paint, or we can't remove in a material slot. Let's get rid of the car paint and change it to headlamp reflector. Now let's set the shading to smooth, and that's looking pretty good. Okay, so now we can go ahead and unhide our tail light. So if we just place a little light bulb in there, like we did for the tail light, or the headlight, sorry, it will look like the car is in reverse and braking at the same time. And this is not what we want. So on the tail light, the little ring that we made, not that one, but the chrome ring there, we're going to use this to basically create a tunnel for the reverse light. So with those two vertices there selected, hit E, or two loops, hit E and then Y to extrude along the Y axis. And that will just channel the light from the center light bulb straight into the lens for the reverse light. And then we'll just line the outer section with 8 lights to create a nice even lighting for the for the brake light. Okay, so let's go ahead and bring in an icosphere now. And this is going to be our light bulb. Make sure that the subdivisions is set to 1. Tab into edit mode and let's scale that down to the size of the tunnel. So right about there should be good. Okay. So now let's go ahead and duplicate that. Tab into edit mode, hit G and then Z, and just bring it down until it fits between our little center tunnel and the outside of our tail light. Once you've done that, hit period, hit Shift D while still in edit mode, rotate 180 degrees, and that will just put it up on top. Let's double tap A and rotate 90 degrees, double tap A again, duplicate, rotate 45 degrees, and now we've created a nice even distribution of 8 light bulbs. So those are our light bulbs for the brake light, yeah. And this one there is the light bulb for the reverse light. So let's go ahead now and start assigning the headlight material to those lights. And if we now come over and turn on the viewport, it looks like it's turned on. Oh yes, under the refraction, let's turn the roughness up to 2 for the top refractor and about 0.6 for the bottom. And this is just because this is a plasticky material. It's not perfectly clear, and that will nice and evenly distribute the light. So now we need to work on the reverse light. It's nearly identical. So let's go ahead and get rid of this diffuse node. Bring in a refraction shader. Hit Shift D to duplicate it. Let's bring out a mix shader. Connect these nodes up. Come on. There we go. And now we need to bring in a ring or a wave texture again. Set it to rings. Connect factor to factor. Okay. Detail and detail scale set to 0. Let's bring out the texture coordinates. Connect UV to vector. And now we actually need to just take this and drop the color nearly to black. So that's good. We also need to change the roughness to 2 and the roughness for the bottom one to 0.6 as well. So let's go ahead and unpause that. So the scale is obviously way off. 20 works quite well. 20. There we go. You can turn that up if you want, and you'll get more rings. So 30 actually looks pretty good too. But 0 is off, and then it's up from there. So that is looking quite good to me. Let's go ahead and separate these lights. So these light materials, so we can actually turn the lights on and off. So this one's going to be lamp, tail light, or reverse light it should be. Reverse light. Let's turn it down. Almost off, maybe. Right about there should be good to just make it look like it is there, just not on. Maybe a little more. There we go. So that's good. And we can turn this one on or off. So that looks pretty good for being off. Okay, so that should pretty well do it for the tail lights. I can't really think of anything more to do to them. So that is how you use a texture to create the appearance of ridges in a tail light. In this next section, we are going to put the texturing on the center section of the dashboard and the side panels of the interior. So right in there. This is going to be an image-based texture, so you will have to download that from the resource section that will be in the description. This part will be a lot on UV unwrapping the dashboard and the interior. So with the dashboard selected, hit the divide key on the number pad, and we're just going to go ahead and mark the seams. So the seams will go right in there. Let's finish that seam off there. It'll go right there. There. Gets a little bit hard to move around, so I'm just going to hit Control E, mark seam, and then we can deselect everything. Move our viewer. So it should be there. Let's mark that seam. And hit Control E, mark seam there. Okay. I think we have one more to do. Right there. So that's looking pretty good. Now we need to head over to the UV editor. So right there. Let's clear this image out. Bring in the new image. It will look something like that. So that's the nice texture that we're going for. So with this selected, hit U, unwrap, and we can see right here that we've got the main dash part here. So let's rotate that -90 degrees. I'm just going to stick it up there. Clicking this button will allow us to see what part goes where. So we can see that this part is this glove box area, and that is backwards. So let's unclick it. Select that there. Hit Control L. Rotate 180 degrees. That should just line up right there. If we go back to this other mode here, we can see that this part is also backward, and it goes over here. So we have to deselect this. Hit Control L, rotate 180 degrees, and just line that up like so. Let's just take the rest of these, hit L, or Control L, scale them down. Let's just move them off to the side, because they aren't going to have this texture applied, and just scale this one up. Like so. Now remember that these circles are going to be quite small on this dash, so we're going to have to scale up quite a ways. We can also use the vector, or the vector mapping. So let's head over to the materials again and get that all set up. So with the dash selected, let's create a new material slot and a new material. I'm just going to call this dash texture. And let's bring in the image texture. Just that one there. Connect the color to the color. And we can already kind of see what's happening here. And I'm just going to bring in the texture coordinate. Let's connect UV to UV, or to vector. But that's still not quite right. So let's just bring in a mapping node. We can change the scale. No, 2 should be good, right? It's up to you how much you change it. Just there we go. So that is pretty good. Now we need to go and actually apply this material to the sections. The nice part about the seams is that Blender will recognize these when we hit Control L, so we will only get the part that we want. So let's just assign this material now, and there we go. Let's take a look at how it looks. We zoom in here a little bit. We can see that we are now getting this nice texture on the dash. Now we need to do the same thing to the doors. So I'm just going to quickly turn this off. There we go. Hit the divide key again. And we need to do the same thing to these panels. So separating them out, let's go ahead and select along the edge that it needs to be on. So depending on where you want to do it, thinking this edge there, this edge there, this one there, and let's do the bottom side, this one there, there, and there. Let's hit Control E, mark seam, and let's bring in that material, so dash texture. Now let's head back over to the UV editor. There we go. Hit U and unwrap. Well, we need to unwrap the whole thing. So let's just figure out where the parts are. Although it shouldn't matter too much, let's just try scaling this up. Maybe it will be nice, but it probably won't be nice to us, so we'll have to deal with that later. Let's head back over to the materials and assign where it needs to be assigned. So right there, boom. Take a look how that looks now. Of course, we have this turned off. And actually, that doesn't look too bad. So that should be good to go. There is the material on the dash and the interior. We're going to go ahead now and create a scene backdrop and some basic lighting. Basically, the backdrop will just be a smooth plane that curves up toward the back and hides the environment color from the camera. We're going to place the backdrop itself on the second render layer and the lighting on the bottom first and second render layers. The lighting will not be final, so they'll just be to let us see what things are looking like. If you have a slower computer, I still would recommend doing a test render just so that you can see that all of the materials are working, but definitely lower the samples and the resolution. Probably 25%, 20% should be good enough, just because it will take forever now that we have all of the materials being calculated as well as all of the meshes. So let's get digging in on the backdrop. So on the second render layer, bring in a plane. Let's tab into edit mode and go into side view mode, orthographic, hit E to extrude, And let's just extrude this up. Do 3 extrusions, just so that it looks like that. Let's hit S and then X, just to scale it up along the X axis. And let's pull this guy out along the Y. Now let's hit Control 1 to throw in a loop cut, and set the shading to smooth. Have to have the whole thing selected. Let's throw in a loop cut there and a loop cut there, just to sharpen things up. Now holding down Shift and pressing 1 will bring up our first layer again. Let's just align everything and scale this up a bit. Once we have it to size, we're going to rotate it along the Z axis so that it fills the camera. So position it, and that should be good to go. Now let's go ahead and create a very simple material for it. It's going to be a velvet material, so I'm just going to call this backdrop. Change it from a diffuse to a velvet, and let's just give it a nice deep blue. Maybe not that deep, but something right in there should be good. Now we're going to start working on the lamps. So let's go ahead and position our 3D cursor above the car. This is going to be the top lamp that gives us a nice overall glow. And let's just scale it up along the Y-axis so that it covers the length of the car, and then along the X so that it covers the width. Now let's just move it over, make sure it's somewhat centered. Something like that should be good. Now let's go ahead and give this one a material. It will be an emission, and set the color to the strength to 2.5. I'm just going to call this lamp, top lamp. This way it will be positioned with other lamps in this area up here. Let's now go ahead and move this to the first bottom render layer. Next, let's go ahead and add kind of this side plane here. And what this is going to do is it will create a nice sharp reflection along the side of the car, and it just looks pretty good. So let's just rotate this along the Y-axis. Right about there should be good. We're going to scale it down along the local X. Let's just bring it down right about there. And now let's just scale it up along the Y, so that it reaches the entire car. So right about like so. This needs a new material, lamp, and I'm just going to call this side lamp. Throw in an emission shader, set the strength to 1.5. Okay, so that's looking pretty good. If we were to render it right now, these lamps would be in the camera, and that would be screwing things up. So let's go over to the object properties, and under ray visibility, uncheck camera. So this scene should be pretty much ready to go for the for a test render. One thing we should do first, though, is make sure that the composition is decent. So let's just turn on some things here to help us out a bit. So I'm just going to rotate the camera a little bit so that we have something interesting at all of the points. Okay, that should actually be fine because we got a point there and a point right at the back of the car. Good to go. This concludes this episode. Next time, we'll be creating a lighting setup using the render layers. This will give us a lot of control over different lighting aspects. We will also finish up on compositing the car. If you enjoyed this tutorial, please like it and subscribe to BlenderWiz if you haven't already. If you have suggestions for future tutorials or suggestions to make these ones better, please let me know in the comment section. Thank you for watching.